Back to Yerushalmi Pesachim, we are holding at 39a. Tal Amud Aleph, 39a. Halacha Gimel, Perek Chamesh Halacha Gimel. We're talking about additional machshavas. Just close that door, please. Additional thoughts that pass to the Korban Pesach. So one who slaughters a Korban Pesach for the intention of someone who can't actually eat it, or wasn't meant to eat it, or can't eat it, or actually it's can't eat it, and someone who wasn't included in the group to eat it, someone who's not had bris milah, but that's mein, people who are tamei, pasul is pasul. If, however, they did it if you have intention for those who eat and those who not eat, or those in the group and those not in the group, those who had bris milah and those who haven't. That's me'im v'latayre, kasha. So if you've included various groups, you've included the ones who can together with the ones who can't, then it's okay. Now the tamid of the afternoon was brought after midday, and the Pesach was brought after the tamid of the afternoon. Now what about if you did not bring the Korban Pesach properly? So if you bring the Korban Pesach in the morning, pasul is no good. Shenema, it says bein ha'abayim, it's got to be in the afternoon. Now, what happens? You did in the afternoon, but before the tamid, kaidem the tamid, kasha is still kasha. Vavad, providing so someone's going to stir the blood of the Korban Pesach. Don't let it run. You want it to remain suitable for sprinkling, and then quickly get on with your tamid. Right? Actually, zarek dama tamid. You have to sprinkle the tamid blood. Doesn't matter if the shechita of Pesach was first, but the sprinkling of the blood of the tamid has to come first, and then you sprinkle the blood of the Korban Pesach. However, in Nizrak, if, however, you did sprinkle the Korban Pesach blood before the tamid, kasha, it is still kasha. So even if you brought it in the afternoon before the tamid, b'di'evet, it is okay. It's just lechatchila that it should be after the tamid, but it's not essential. Okay, so we said in our Mishnah that Pesach which was slaughtered for those who can't eat it is pasul. What's the source for this? You should slaughter Korban Pesach for people who are eating it. How do I know you need to shecht it for those who can eat it? Rav Yechim Shem Yushma, ish lefi achloi. Each person according to his eating tachaisu, you sort of include him on the seh. Now the word tachaisu is lashon sursi huzeh. It's an Aramaic word. It's an expression of slaughtering. Like someone who tells his friend, slaughter for me this lamb. So from here we learn you should slaughter the Korban Pesach for someone who is fitting to eat from it. Now, what about the various machshavas we said in our Mishnah? Case of shlo la'achla. So what's the case of slaughtering of thoughts for someone who can't eat it? Shachta l'shem chayla, or l'shem zaken, for an ill person or an elder. She'eni chayla lechal kazais, they can't eat kazais. Case of shlo limnoya. What does it mean a thought for someone who's not included in the group? Shachta l'shem b'nei chaburachas. You slaughter it for another group, someone who's part of another group and not part of your group. Now, the Bryce has mentioned a sick person or an elder, lashon yachid, like singular. Sounds like that one of them might have been sick. And that you're slaughtering a Pesach for Chabura, where one is sick, he can't eat. It sounds like it's possible because you got machshava shlo la'achlav. So, Adar Amra. Now, from here we can learn, Shakatan yesh lo minyan libsul. Does that mean, let's say a child, let's say you got a child in a group, which is very common, you might have a child in a group. If that child can't eat kazais, that pasul the rest. Many times you're going to get small children, a baby can't eat a kazais, you're going to pass the whole group because of that. Adar Amra, and furthermore, we can learn, Haya Nasan B'derech HaChagah, if one of the group was far away when they brought the Korban Pesach, he can't eat from it. Shachta Lishman, he slaughtered it with him included. Pasul is pasul because he can't eat from it. And that's also a very common occurrence. Right? How can it be one of them is a bit far away, he won't get there and reach there, he passes the korban for everyone? This is a very common occurrence, so how can it be? So Hadar Amra, and furthermore, Hadar Maseyel Jeremiah, this price supports the rabbis of the south. The Jeremiah Amrin, they said, Emurim sha'avdu, when now you've got even Emurim which go on the Mizbeach, and you lost them. Mechashev lahen, k'mish hen kayam, and you can still have machshava pigul as if they're still around, so they got lost. You sprinkle the blood, and you're thinking, I'm going to find these emurim, I'm going to put them on the Mizbeach late. Right, at the wrong time. That machshava creates pigul for the korban. One who eats the korban is kores. Now, what do you see here? A zaken, or a sick person, who can't eat kazayis, is if they're not included on the carbon. And a thought of it shouldn't really matter. But still, the Brisa says they do passel the whole group because of machshava of shaloi la'achlav, even though they can't eat it. And that's like this chachmei adarim. They're saying if you have a pickled machshava on a murim, which are lost, you don't have them now, and you had a machshava, you're going to put them in the wrong time, they're lost, you create problems. And that is the shit of the chachmei adarim, and that's not, the halacha is definitely not like that. So the Gemara also, from the Brisa, one who slaughters a Korban Pesach for a group, where one is a chayla zaken who can't eat from it, the common puzzle. Adar Amra, we learn shachtai that if you slaughter the Korban Pesach, shetochem imenu chatzi chaburasai, on the condition that you're going to eat just half the group will eat from it. Yeah, it's also puzzle, right? So it sounds like all these things seem to be, and it doesn't make sense that one person can't eat, it's puzzle. One person can't get there, it's puzzle. Emurim, it's like the emurim which you have in kavanah pickle when you don't even have them, and then this last one, someone's going half the group will eat. It's puzzle. So Gemara says, Amrav Hagai Kumri Rabbi Yosef. He says, when it says in Brisa Shloi La'achlav, and for a sick person, Tifta, we're talking about a case Shayu Kula Chaydim. They were all sick. No one was going to eat from it. If, however, you got sick people included and healthy people, it is kosher. Okay? And with this, you understand all the questions that we've asked. So as long as some of them are okay, a chabura, let's say, you've got a child there who can't eat kazais, or one of them is far away, it's kosher, because everyone else can eat from it. The third question, don't compare the brisa to chachmei adarim. If you don't have one person that can eat, it's puzzle. Ish lefi achla, yeah, you got to have people eating it. The fourth question, the whole b'nei chabura can't eat. There's not a case of that because half the chabura are going to eat. But still, there's a problem because if you're going to tell me if they're all sick, they can't eat kazais, then the wording should have been different. In this name, we should have said the shem b'nei chabura pasulin. If you slaughter for a whole group or apostle, well, it says this is for a sick person. It shouldn't say that. It sounds like even one sick person puzzles the lot. Amalei. So he answered back, V'shahayu sham kasherim. We're talking about a case where the people there were kosher, there were kosher people who could eat, and there were apostle who couldn't eat. V'shachta l'shem absulin. If you only have intention for the puzzle ones, that's when it is puzzle. Okay, agreed? So as long as you have intention for a group, it's fine. If you only have intention for puzzle, then it's puzzle. Now we said in our Mishnah, Pesach which is slaughtered for those who eat, and those who don't eat is kosher. Our Rav Elazar, Masnisa, our Mishnah which we learnt, if you slaughtered for those who eat and those who don't eat is kosher. It's talking about a case, but sheshachta la'achlav, it could be you slaughtered for those who are eating, v'niskapa by la'achlav v'shloi la'achlav. So you have in mind, you're slaughtering for those eating, right? You're going to sprinkle the blood for both, those who eat and those who don't eat. You hear that? So now we're breaking it down. The slaughtering is for those who are eating. The sprinkling is for those eating and those not eating. Now, why is it kosher? Because machshava of those who are not eating doesn't puzzle with sprinkling. It's more about the eating side, not the sprinkling side. However, if the very first shechita was for the intention of eat and not eat, it could be it is puzzles. This is Rav. He's saying no. That if you slaughter it with the intention of those who eat and not eat, it would be a problem according to Rav. He's saying it's only not a problem if the sprinkling is for both. That's not puzzle. Rav Simlai, Rav Yonason, came to Rav Yonason. Amalei, he said, Alfan Agada, teach me some nice midrashim and their reasons. Amalei, nah, forget it. These Babylonians, they don't know their Agada. I'm not teaching that. Definitely not someone from the south. Well, they're a bit proud. I don't know how much they've learnt over there in the south. They'll explain the drushes in a funny way. And you're from Nadar. You were born in Nadar, which is in Bavel. And you live in the south. I'm not teaching you any Agada. Amalei says, well, tell me something. What's the difference between a Korban Pesach slaughtered for the right reason, for Korban Pesach and other things, which is puzzle, or when you slaughter it for those who eat and those who don't eat, which is kosher? Amalei. So he answered about the difference is like this. Shalai lishmai v'shalai lishmai. When you've got machshava, right, a psul in the actual carbon, right? So that's psul megufa. That's a problem with the carbon. It's puzzle. Whereas la'achlav shalai la'achlav, those who eat and those who don't eat, so that's the problem with someone else. It's not the problem with the carbon. It's the problem with the people, and therefore the Pesach is kosher. Now lishmai, and also shalai lishmai. When you slaughter it for this and that carbon and this carbon, you can't start separating out which bit did I think about psul and which bit is kosher. You can't tell me that one bit is lishmai and one bit is shalai lishmai. You can't. So the whole thing's possible. But if you slaughter it for people who can eat and those who can't, you can separate the bit that you thought about as psul and say that's those who, the bit that those who are eating will be on one side of the animal, and those who are not fitting will be on the second side of the animal, and that's why the carbon is kosher. And another reason between them, a difference, lishmai v'shalai lishmai is more severe, because shalai lishmai applies with all kachim, noig b'chol kachim, right? Whereas la'achlav v'shalai la'achlav, to eat, for those who are eating, those who are not eating, that's only din in Pesach. That's more lenient, because ain't a noig out of a Pesach. That only applies with Pesach alone. Okay, Rav Yosef. So these were various differences that Rav Yonasan said to Rav Sumlai. Now we're going to go into this. Rav Yosef. Menadad Rav Elazar. Now from Rav Elazar we brought earlier on, we can learn the first two differences which Rav Yonasan explained. Rav Elazar, remember, Rav Elazar was talking about a case, Masnisa, he said the kavanah of the Mishnah is, you slaughter it for those who are eating, but you're thinking about the sprinkling for everyone. Yeah? Those who can eat and those who can't eat. That was Rav Elazar's answer. And that was okay. If the shechita at the very beginning was la'achlav v'shalai la'achlav, your shechita was for those who eat and those who not eat, it would be puzzle. That definitely would be no good. Now, according to Rav Yonasan's differences, I don't understand what Rav Elazar is telling us. He said differences between lishmai, v'shalai lishmai, and those who eat and those who can't eat. And he gave various differences. Now, how does that fit in with what we're saying now? So we're saying what? If you slaughter it for those who eat, and the sprinkling is for people who can eat and can't eat, that's why it's okay. Now, how does this fit in? It doesn't. Because Hare, one who slaughters the Korban Pesach for eating and not eating, the problem is because of the people. And you can sort of separate which pieces for those who eat, which pieces those who not eat. And even so, Rabbi Elazar is saying, if you have in mind for both those eating and slaughtering, right, you're slaughtering for those eating and those not eating is no good. But according to Rabbi Yonasan, but we could separate out the meat, and that's for those who are eating and those who are not. You have to say that those differences Rabbi Yonasan gave are not correct. Elokating. This is the difference between the two cases. Lishmai v'shalai lishmai. When you're slaughtering for lishmai, the right carbon, the wrong carbon, noig b'chal kachim, that applies to all kachim, and therefore it's more severe. Whereas la'achlav v'shalai la'achlav, those who eat and those who don't eat, that's only a problem in a noig ala per Pesach. It's more lenient. It only applies with Korban Pesach. Now, another reason to distinguish between those who eat and those who don't eat, and whereas the machshava lishmai v'shalai lishmai, amravavin, is la chayre. There's another difference between them. Lishmai v'shalai lishmai passes. Why? Because shalai lishmai is chamor. It's more severe, right? Shanaig b'chal avodas. You know all the four avodas of the carbon. What are the four avodas again? You got the slaughtering. You've got the sprinkling. You got the slaughtering. You've got the receiving the blood. You've got the walking, and then you've got the sprinkling. Yeah. So shalai lishmai, the problem, the wrong machshava, the wrong carbon applies to all four stages. Whereas la'achlav v'shalai la'achlav, for those who eat, those who don't eat, that's more lenient. That only applies with slaughtering. Okay, right. Now we carry on about Korban Pesach, which is slaughtered, those who eat and those who are not eating. La'achlav gezeisin, v'shalai la'achlav gezeisin. So you're thinking, right, I'm slaughtering for those who are eating, they're going to eat a gezais. Those who are not eating, going to eat a gezais. Right? Kosher, that's okay. That's why our Mishnah. You slaughter it for those who are eating, not eating, that's okay. Next case. La'achlav gezeisin, v'shalai la'achlav kechatzi zeisin. Right. Those who are going to eat it are going to have a proper shit. Those who are not going to eat are not going to eat a tiny bit. Yeah, those who are not fitting to eat will eat a chatzi zayis. Well, that's definitely okay because they're not really going to ruin it. They're only going to eat a chatzi zayis. Koshkin kosher is definitely okay. So what about if you think those fitting to eat and those not fitting to eat, they're all going to eat just half a zayis? What's the din? Now, malan kayamin, what are we talking about here? Should be fine. Because if the machshava of those who are not fitting to eat, they're going to eat half a zayis, is if that's an effective thought, right? If it's good enough to call it a proper thought, the ones who are not meant to eat are going to eat a half a zayis. If that's good enough to call it a proper thought, then it's good enough for the other side of the ones who will eat, who are meant to eat, that they're going to eat a half a zayis. You follow? If it's good enough to call it eating, then it's good enough for the ones who are meant to eat to call it eating as well. So then the thought of those who are fitting to eat are only going to eat half a zayis, but that should be effective enough. And therefore you got machshava of those who are eating, those who are not eating. Should be fine. If, however, the thought of those who are fitting to eat half a zayis is not going to be an effective thought, then the other one, then the other one is not going to be effective to pasel for those who are not fitting to eat. So there's no machshava which has got anything tangible in it. It's like a Pesach slaughtered stam, and that's fine. That's kosher. So the Gemara answers the suffix, the thought of eating half a zayis, does it help or not? Rabbi Yosef, Masnisa Amra. From the Mishnah we learn machshava l'kosher. Machshava of those fitting to eat half a zayis is effective. The Tanina Tamad we've learned in Zvachim. Now this is about machshava psul. So let's say you have in mind when you're doing a korban, loichal to eat chatzi zayis, I'm going to eat half a zayis of flesh, or lahaktik chatzi zayis, and I'm going to offer up half a zayis of the imurim outside the wrong time or the wrong place. It's kosher, because half a zayis and half a zayis of different things don't join up. She'ein achila v'haktorah mitzarfin. They don't join up to make a gazais. You don't have a share to pass all the korban. So it sounds like if you had in mind to give, let's say, 2 people half a zayis to each one in the wrong time, that would be pickle. Eating and eating definitely joins up. And same thing with Korban Pesach then. A machshava of eating half a zayis to a few people, that's fitting to call it a collection that they're all going to eat the shit. Okay. You slaughter your Korban Pesach for the intention that half of your group will fulfill your duty. Rav Yonah Posel, Rav says no good. Even though you had in mind those, they don't fulfill your duty. Why not? You're like putting the forgiveness, or at least the kapara of half a group, which you had in mind, on the half which you didn't have in mind. Again, what's the case? I'm bringing a Korban Pesach that that half the group should fulfill your duty. Right? So he's like, you're putting it depending on the other half, this half or the other half. He says, you're like depending this group, which you had in mind, on the group which you didn't. Since it's not going to help for the ones you didn't have in mind, it's not going to help the ones you did have in mind. Because the Pesach has to pass to the whole group. Rabbi Yosef said, kosher. The korban is kosher, and the ones that you had in mind, they do fulfill their duty with it. Okay. But later on, in his second version, he changed his mind when he taught these dinim, and he changed his mind. He said, no, it's no good. Like Rav Yonah. He said, wait a minute, you told us it's okay, and now you're changing your mind? Like it often Rebbe Kasher, he says, is it so secure in your mind like a nail? We must keep with it. I'm changing my mind, and that's that. Okay. Now we said, if you bring your Korban Pesach before midday, it's possible. If you bring it after midday, before the Tamid, it's kosher. You bring it before midday, possible. Straight after midday, kosher. Before the Tamid of the afternoon, is kosher. Okay. The tiny came. We've learned in a brisa. Are you going to tell me? Maybe look, if you brought the Korban Pesach first, maybe you don't bring the Tamid afterwards. Maybe that day don't bring the Tamid in the afternoon. Talmud Lamed says no. Tasa, you have to do it. Riba, you always have to do the Tamid in the afternoon, even if you've gone and brought the Korban Pesach before. Amra Baba, Masnisa Amra Pesach Atzmai Kasha. From a brisa, there's a proof that if you bring the Pesach before the Tamid, the Pesach is valid. Because in Tema Pasul, if you're going to tell me the Pesach is Pasul, then I don't understand. It's Kamisha like Kadmai. It's as if it's Pasul, then you've not done anything. It's if you haven't brought, as if it's not come before the Tamid. So why does the Brisa need to tell you bring the Tamid afterwards? If it's Pasul, it's not effective, then of course you bring the Tamid. Why not? The fact, you see from the Brisa that Pesach is kosher, and he has to tell you that even so, you can bring the Tamid afterwards. Because if it was nothing, the Pesach, then why do I have to tell you can bring the Tamid? Of course you bring the Tamid. So this is telling you that even so, it's kosher, but you can still bring the Tamid afterwards. Now we said in the last part of the Mishnah, if it was slaughtered before the Tamid, it's kosher, but if you can still sprinkle the blood, we want to try and sprinkle the blood of the Tamid first, and then the Kol Pesach. Tamana Tama. In the Brisa it says that Dam Tamid, the sprinkling of the blood of the Tamid, ve'evarav, and the limbs and the Mizbeach, Koidmin, the Pesach, come before Pesach. And Pesach comes before the Keteres, and Keteres comes before preparing the Neres, that's the Neres. So even the Evorei, the limbs of the Tamid on the Mizbeach, should also come before the Pesach. But here we're saying, as long as you sprinkle the blood, that's good enough. Here you're saying, as long as the blood of the sprinkling is done first. You don't mention about the limbs on the Mizbeach. Rav says, there's no contradiction. Here we're talking about Pachai, the Pesach is still living. Whereas in our Mishnah, it's already shachar, it's already slaughtered. So when do the limbs come before the Pesach? If the Pesach is still living. So you bring the limbs on the Tamid before you slaughter the Korban Pesach. But if already the Pesach is dead, and you've got the blood in your hands, right? Don't delay the sprinkling, just sprinkle the Tamid blood, and then you can sprinkle the Korban Pesach blood. Okay? Halacha dalet. Ha-shoichet es ha-Pesach al ha-chametz. So, one who slaughters a Korban Pesach when he has chametz in his possession. Over below sasa. He transgresses a loy sasa. Lo tishchat, it says, lo tishchat al chametz tam zivchi. You mustn't have chametz in your possession when you slaughter the Korban Pesach. Rabbi Yehuda says, Tamid, also the Tamid in the afternoon has got the same issue. Rav Shimon says, a Pesach which you slaughtered on chametz ba'ba'asa on the 14th, lishmai, you did the normal Pesach for the sake of a Pesach, chayiv, yes, you get lashes if you have chametz there. But Shalom Lishma, if you mucked it up and you slaughter it for something else, pasul. Pesach with Shalom Lishma is pasul, right? The issa to slaughter chametz is only when it's a fitting shchita. But if it's not a fitting shchita, it's pasul, right? Ushar kol hazbachin, all the other karbonos you happen to slaughter on the 14th, ben lishman, ben Shalom Lishman, wherever you got it right, you got it wrong, pasul. You're not over on this issa of having chametz in your possession if you got them wrong. But Vamoyed, if you slaughter during Chol Hamoed, Lishmai, a carbon for its sake, patur, again you're patur. Because we're talking about Pesach now. Because Pesach, Shaloi Bizmanai, is pasul, right? So therefore, that's okay. And therefore the shchita is not fitting, you're not chayv on it. However, the Shaloi Lishmai, if you slaughtered it for the sake of a shlamim, let's say, then you are chayv, you are liable. Because Pesach, Shaloi Bizmanai is a fitting shlamim, that's a fitting shchita. And if you have chametz in your possession, you are liable. Any other korban, I don't know, asham, whatever it is, you slaughter in Chol Hamoed while you have chametz in your possession, you're going to be liable for that. Because they're kosher. It's a shchita ruya, chutz, except, remember, the two korbanos, if you get it wrong, they're pasul, is Pesach and chatzos, yeah? Chutz min ha-chatzos, sheshachta shaloi lishma, that's pasul. And since it's pasul, if you have chametz, you're not going to be liable for that. That's a shchita which is not fitting. Says the Gemara, where do we see you slaughter Korban Pesach, you have chametz at home, you transgress? Talmud says, "Lo tishat al chametz tam zivchi." Don't slaughter while you have chametz around, right? Ainli ela al sheichet. That's one who slaughters with having chametz. Al zoyrek minayin. What about sprinkling the blood? Talmud says, "Lo tishat," says al chametz dam, chametz dam. So there's a reference to dam. Extra word. It tells you sprinkling the blood is also over belav. Now, what about Pesach itself, which is slaughtered with chametz? Is it kosher or pasul now? Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Mima shu mischayev ala zrika. Now, if you're chayev on the sprinkling, if you had chametz in your domain, we're saying you're liable for sprinkling the blood. Hadar Amra, this must tell me that the Pesach must be a valid korban. Pesach asmai kosher. It's not pasul. even though it's slaughtered be'isur, it must be a valid carbon for you to be chayav for having the chametz. Because if you had chametz at the time of sprinkling the blood, you must have had it when you slaughtered. We're assuming. Not necessarily, but we're assuming. You had it for sprinkling, you must have had it for slaughtering. If you're going to tell me that slaughtering it with chametz, the carbon is possible, then you can't tell me that if you sprinkle the blood with the chametz, you're going over again. The sprinkling is a sprinkling of a possible carbon. There's got no meaning at all. Let's see this again. If you're going to be chayav for sprinkling, if you had chametz in your house, it tells me that Pesach, if you already slaughtered it having chametz, the animal is still a kosher carbon. It's not possible, right? If you had chametz at the time of sprinkling, you must have had chametz before. We're assuming, not necessarily, but we're assuming. And if you're going to tell me you're slaughtering it on chametz, if it's possible, then how can you tell me later if you sprinkle it, you're over again? Sprinkling blood of a possible carbon, you're not going to be high for that. Rav Yosef said, it could be, no, you were slaughtered on the chametz and it's possible. Now this possible about sprinkling, we're talking about a case where you only acquired the chametz between the slaughtering and the sprinkling. The time of slaughtering, you're fine. Now you suddenly get out of chametz during the sprinkling time. So the sprinkling was with chametz in your backyard, and the shechita was fine, and therefore you're over on the zrika on this isur. Always in that case, look, one guy is doing the slaughtering, he had no chametz, and someone else is doing the sprinkling. Someone else is doing the sprinkling, and he has chametz. So the sprinkling person is therefore over on the isur. I'm going to bring another source that Pesach slaughtered on chametz is kosher. Tani Chizkiah. He says, how do I know Pesach where you had chametz in your domain? The Pesach is kosher. La tishchat al chametz dam zivchi. Even after it's slaughtered, the Torah calls it also zivchi. The Torah calls it zivchi. It is a zebach. It is a kosher carbon. And the Pesach which is slaughtered on chametz is kosher because he's taken on for granted, right? If it was possible, then you're not going to be chayav for zrika on the chametz. Now, Amramana, if Chizkiah had not told us clearly that when it's slaughtered on chametz is kosher, we could have said, you know what, maybe it's possible. But then, and even so, you'll be chayav on sprinkling as well on chametz. You hear what he's saying? He's saying it could be the animal was possible when you did the slaughtering with chametz, and you'll still be liable for sprinkling, even though the animal's possible. This is what he says, and this is a chiddush. He says, "Motzinu davar pasul." We do find examples. Something is pasul and you're still chayav. We're going to discuss this now. We find elsewhere you can get a carbon which is pasul because of some action, and if you do the action again, you're liable on the second action. Now we're going to discuss this at more depth now. So he's saying you could be chayav for the sprinkling even though it's pasul from the shechita. Let's see. Where do we find this idea? Let's see. You know something. You're not allowed to make a flour offering chametz. And a mincha which became chametz is pasul, right? Apart from the various ones which are chametz, right? Lechem or shavuos, apart from that, everything is chametz is pasul. Hamechametz es hapasula. So, the one who makes a mincha, it's already pasul, and you make it chametz, and it's already pasul. Is to do tani chayav. Some say you're liable for that. Is to do tani potter. Some say you're not. Amram Chista. There's no argument between them. Madama chayav. One says you're liable. But shenifsela machmas chimutza. The reason why you're liable, your case is it became pasul because of the chametz. It became chametz through the kneading, and then you baked it in a state of chimutz, and then the second person is liable even though it was already pasul. So basically it's the same problem twice. You hear that? It became chametz in the kneading, and then the second guy went and baked it in a state of chimutz. So it's the same problem happening twice, and that's where he wants to say you're chayav for the second job, where it's the same thing happening twice. Mandama pasul, the one who says no, you're not chayav, is talking about a case with shaloi nifsala machmas chimutza. The original psul was not because of chametz; it was because of something else. It became tameh. It went out of the azara, and now you're making it chametz, right? This is the one he says you're pasul. So if it was pasul for some other reason, now then you go and make it chametz. He says you're pasul. But the one who says you're chayiv is where it's the same problem of chametz twice. Now, what do we see from here? The din that you're not chayiv on chimutz of a posel mincha is only if the original psul was for some other reason, not for the same reason. If it's the same reason, it could be a chayiv both times. So the same thing here. If Chizkiah had not told us that a Pesach which you slaughter it for chametz is kosher, we might have said it's actually posel b'shchita, and the one who sprinkles it is still chayiv, because the carbon is posel because of the same reason, not for another reason. You hear that? It's the same problem, and the same problem you can be chayiv the second time round, and that goes against Rabbi Shmuel, who said the Torah is chayiv on zrika. It must be a kosher carbon. We're saying no. It could be a posel carbon, but where it's the same problem twice, you'll be chayiv second time as well. Now, once we've learned that one who slaughters on chametz and you're sprinkling the blood on chametz, you're chayiv, what about another avodah done with chametz? Hekte imurin al chametz. You take the fats and things, put them on the mizbeach, and you have chametz. Istele tani chayiv. Some say you're liable. Istele tani potter. Some say you're potter. Mandam chayiv. One says you're liable. Dam mikol makom. The word blood, lotish chametz dam zilchi. That's for sprinkling of the blood, any avodah with the carbon, it's all included, everything. Mandam potter. The one who says potter, use it from a lashon zevach. Zevach in the pasuk. Mazvicha miyuchedes. Just like the slaughtering is unique, the shchita, miyuchedes, shima kebes es kapara. It's effective, it's essential for the kapara. You're chayiv. If you have chametz in your domain, you're liable. So also any avodah which is so much important in the avodah, you're liable if you have chametz. As opposed to yatsu hekte murin she'enan ma'aklin es kapara. As opposed to these other fats, they're not essential in the whole kapara aspect. If you don't burn them on the mizbeach, the carbon is still kosher. They're not therefore included in the chiyuv. What about birds? Monat oif shel chametz. You do malika. You take the neck off a bird and you have chametz. Some say you're liable, some say you're not. Because when it says liable, dam, it says blood. There's also blood. Whereas mandam apato zebach sounds like a carbon as opposed to a bird. Yasa'if she'ena zebach. It's not a case of a zebach. Rabbi Yaakov Azavdi, Boikum Rabbi Yosef. Mandam achayev. The Tanu who holds that when you take the neck of a bird, you're chayev if you have chametz. Nicha, I understand. Yeah, the word blood can include a bird as well. But mandam apatel, what's the reason? Matama, what's his source? Why does he say apatel if you take a bird when you have blood, or when you have chametz? Amale, so he answered back. The reason of the Tanu who holds that malika on chametz is no chiyuv, lemeidin einesh, we learn the punishment of work, avodah done on chametz, me'einesh from a punishment, let's say, on avodah which is done outside the azara. So you have two liabilities here. So an avodah, you're chayev if it's done outside, you're chayev if it's done with chametz. The sort of avodah we're talking about, when you'd be chayev if you did it outside, you'd be chayev if you have chametz. Ve'ein lemeidin einesh, we cannot, however, learn a punishment for avodah done on chametz miptur if there is an exemption on that avodah if it's done outside. So in avodah you're not chayiv outside, you're not chayiv if you do it with chametz. Now the malika of a bird, you're not chayiv if you do it outside the azara, and therefore you're not chayiv if it's done with chametz. You hear that? If you do malika of a bird, you're not chayiv if it's done outside. Rabbanan de Kisrin, the Chachmim of Kisaria, they asked, Yachal HaMakabel. Now, do you think that one who receives the blood of the Pesach, the Mahalech, he walks with it to the Mizbeach, Al Chametz, Yechayiv, you think he's liable? Talmud Lema Zebach. It sounds like the slaughtering. Mazvicha miyuchedes, slaughtering is unique, Shechayavin ala b'chutz. That you're chayiv if it's done outside the Azara, and you're chayiv if it's done with chametz in your possession. So any avodah you're chayiv if it's done outside the Azara, you're chayiv if it's done with chametz. However, Yatzam Mekabel, as opposed to one who receives the blood, Mahalech ala chametz, or just doing the hiluch, and you have chametz in your possession, she'ein chayavin alem b'chutz. You're not chayiv on them if you do them outside. So you're not chayiv if you have chametz in your possession while you do the walking. Yachal amakti amurin al chametz yeh chayiv. What about offering the fats on the mizbeach? You'd be liable if you have chametz in your house, because bringing a murim outside the azara would be liable actually. Talmud Loma, it says no, dam, sprinkling of the blood. Mazrika miyuchedes, sprinkling is unique. Shima keves kapara, right? It's essential for the kapara. Yatsa hekte murin, as opposed to the burning of the fats. She'enon ma'akmin is a kapara. They're not essential, so you're not chayiv if they're done when you have chometz in your house. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Bazabdi, Rabbi Yosef, Ada dain leliftu. You want to explain all these psukim for exemptions. One who receives the blood, one who walks with it, and you have chometz. One who offers these things, fats on his beach, for chometz. You're potter. You want to say all of these, you're potter. But why? Maybe darshan the other way. Maybe you're liable. Maybe say like this. Maybe you think you're potter if you bring the limbs outside. Al chometz, yeh potter if you have chometz. Talmud lema zevach. Slaughtering. And we learn mazvicha miyuchedes. Slaughtering is unique. Shechayamin ala b'chutz. You're chayiv if you do it outside. Afani arba hektem murin. I'll include all the limbs on the mizbeach. Shechayamin ala b'chutz. You are liable if you offer them outside. Yachal hamakabel. And maybe the one who receives the blood. A mahalech. One who goes with the blood. Al chometz yeh potter. Maybe you think you're potter. Maybe not. Talmud lema dam. Sprinkling the blood. Mazrika miyuchedes. The sprinkling is essential. Shima keves kapara. I'm going to include the one who receives the blood, the one who walks with the blood, that you'll be liable. They're also essential. So therefore, maybe the one who receives the blood, the one who walks with it, and you have chometz, maybe you're liable. Rabbi Yosef answers back. An avodah which is similar to these two halachas which you have in a zevach, right? We learn from it the din of chometz in your possession or not. So it's got to be equal to these two. An avodah which is not the same as zevach in two aspects, we don't learn from it if it's done with chometz. So it says like this: Zvicha mazvicha miyuchedes. Look, slaughtering, you got these two halachas. It's very essential. Shema keves kapara, and you're chayiv if you do it outside. So anything similar to that, you're chayiv if you have chometz in your possession. However, yotza hamakabel, as opposed to one receiving the blood, walking with it to mizbeach. Well, since ein chayavin aleim b'chutz, you're not liable if you do them outside. Therefore, you're not going to be chayiv if you have chometz. And also, yotza hektem murim, we will exclude the burning of the fats. Again, they're not essential. She'einan ma'akos kapara. Therefore, since they're not essential to the kapara, you're not going to be chayiv if you have chometz in your possession. Now, where are we going to go to today? Shall I carry on a bit more? Yeah? Okay, a bit more. Now we're going to come to a new matter. What is the share of chometz that you're chayiv for shechting, having chometz in your possession? So we're going to bring Machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel about the share of chometz that you're liable. Taman Tanina. We've learned in Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai Omrim, they said sa'or. Now, the share of sa'or, which what they always call sourdough or something, to be over on it on a lav of Pesach is a kazayis. The chometz, the share of chometz is kasebus, which is a date which is slightly bigger share. Yeah, so sa'or, which is super strong stuff, is a kazayis Beis Shammai, and chometz is a slightly bigger size of the date. Beis Hillel said no, it's all the same. Whether it's sa'or or whether it's chometz, kazayis. The share is a kazayis. Now let's look at Beis Shammai. Rav Zrikan Rabbi Yezber Chanina. Lo Shanu. Now when did Beis Shammai say the share is of chometz is a date? Is elele biyurai? That's the isur bali yurai bali motzi. You got to get rid of it. But as far as eating, you're chayiv even smaller. Aval achila, they agree that kazayis. But B'var B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, he said bein lebiyurai. No, Beis Shammai strict to their guns always. Bein lebiyurai, bein achila. Whether it's from removing or eating, bali yurai bali motzi. They hold that the share chometz is a kasebes, is a date size. Right, chometz is kasebes, they say. Come Ramona, when Ramona met Rav Chizkiah, Amalei, he said to him, Manan Shama Rebbe Hadam Milsa. Where did Rebbe hear this? According to Beis Shammai, chometz is always kasebes, according to Beis Shammai. Amalei, so Rav Chizkiah answered, I heard it min Ravo. Amalei, he says, V'anan Amrin, and we say, I've got a tradition. Ravo said, Rabbi Yochanan, that Beis Shammai holds, the bi'urai, to get rid of it is a kasebes, the bigger share, but la'achila, to eat it, is kazayis, is the smaller share. So, okay, you've told me, according to Beis Shammai, the share chometz to be chayev is not the same with all these stories. So the question is, what is the share chametz? So it's all very well. You've got ownership is one side, eating is one side. But what about when you have it in your domain? How much do you have to have? Yeah, shachtay al chametz. So what is the share of chametz to be liable when you shecht the carbon? The question is, what do we follow here? So do we look at the eating aspect, which is a kazais, or the man you have to remove, which is bigger, which is a date? It's a very good question. I'm afraid we do not answer it. This is according to Beis Shammai. According to Beis Hillel is always kazais, but according to Beis Shammai, it could be it's a keseves. Now another question about chametz which you're chayav for sheichet al chametz. Tamam, we've learned. If you've got Shnei chatzoi zeisim b'toch habayis, you've got 2 half olives of chametz in your house, right? Different parts of the house. A half olive of chametz here, half olive of chametz there. Ain't a bayis mitzvah if the house doesn't join them up. You're not over having a kazais in one area. If, however, b'toch hakli, if they're in a vessel, a keli mitzvah, if the keli joins them up to make them, just like with challah, we say a big keli joins everything up. Yeah. If you slaughter, we're having these 2 half zaysim in the house, what's the din? Do we say, well, the house doesn't join them up? Within the house, they don't join up, so therefore, potter, you're not liable. Had they been in a keli, they would join up. A keli is time, therefore you should be chayiv. Very good question. We have no answer. Next one. Shachtai al siur. Siur is a dough which has begun to ferment but has not fully fermented. So a very early stage chametz. Okay. Shachtai al siur. What's the din? What do they call it there in English?
Siur.
Siur. Oh, very good. What's the din? Do we say Ma'achad Amar B'Huna B'Shem Rav said Mutar Achila L'Kav? Look, you can give it to your dog on Pesach. It's more lenient than proper chametz. So if you shecht with it potter, you're not liable at all. Or maybe Ma'achad Rav Amar Leiken Al Achilasai. Since Rav said you get malchus for eating, therefore chayav. If you shecht with it, you should be liable. Very good question. I'm afraid we have no answer. Right. Rav Shimon, we go to the bottom of the page. Yeah. Rav Shimon Lakishama. One is slaughtered with chametz. You're not chayav. You've got to be shechting one of the group, including you're going to shecht. You've got to also shecht for someone in the group. Rabbi Yecham, he said the chiyuv is whether whether the sheichet is slaughtering. Does the sheichet need to be part of the group? Does he need to be? Is that how we're learning? He's not chayav until he has to be one of the group included with this Korban Pesach. Rabbi Yecham, he said no. The sheichet Abi She'ena B'nei it doesn't have to be part of the group. And whether there's chavos de'acham B'nei Chabura, Abi She'ena sheichet. And even if one of the group has chametz, even though the owner of the chametz is not the sheichet, so it could be someone else has chametz. Now, whose domain has to have the chametz? So where does the chametz need to be liable? Rabbi Yechon says, "Afilu nasim imay b'Yerushalmi." It's not in the Azara. The chametz is in Yerushalmi. Rav Shimon Lakish, he said, "Ad she'ein nasim imay b'Azara." No, you're not chayav until it's got to be in the Azara. Den kedate, but den kedate. Rav Yechon according to his view, Shlakish according to his view. There's Palgun, Machlokes Rav Yechon Shlakish, following like this. If you do a job, Vishnei Yom Tovim Shal Goliath, on 2 days of Yom Tov, where each one might be Yom Tov, it might be a weekday, and they warn you on 2 days, don't do work. Now, it's Hasra out of doubt. Each warning, is it a weekday or is it not a weekday? Rabbi Yochanan, Mekabelin Hasra al Safek. Yes, it's a proper warning. It's considered a warning, and he gets lashes. Rish Lakish, he said, "Ain't Mekabelin Hasra al Safek." He says, no, it's not considered Hasra, and therefore you're potel. Right? It's because you can't have Hasra al Safek. Now, their argument about where the chametz is to be liable is also based on this, whether a warning out of doubt is a warning. When we warn the sheichet, don't shecht on your chametz. Now, it's all very well if we can see the chametz with him, then there's definite warning. If, however, we can't see the chametz, it's not here. It's a safek. Maybe it's been removed already. Maybe it's been broken down. Someone's broken it down. Rabbi Yechon holds, warning out of doubt is a warning. So he holds, even if the chametz is not with us, we warn you about it, if later on we find out whether it was there all along, he's chayav lashes. Rish Lakish holds, warning out of doubt is not considered a warning. So he doesn't get lashes until the chametz is actually with him in the Azara. It's got to be a definite warning. Based on this argument, The Gemara says there is a situation where Shlokish will agree that the Chiyuv is there even if the Chometz is actually in Yerushalayim and not in the Azara. According to this, Al Kol Moedim, everyone will agree, Shimhaya Nosan Kenegdai. You could see it, the guy's slaughtering, and he can see it through the window. B'chalayim b'Yerushalayim, he can see it at the time of Shechita, he's liable. Because even Manda Amar Safek, even in the case of someone who says a doubt, in this case, it's not a doubt. Vadai. Right? Even if Shlokish will patter when it's in Yerushalayim, that's where, you don't know where it is, you can't see it. But here you can see it, so he's going to be liable. Now, where's the two dots? Is that here? Mandam, and a few couple more lines, is it? Yeah? So now, we said the Seid Machlekes Rav Yochanan and Shlokish Hasra Safek. Now, if we can we could change their argument. Could be they're arguing, what does it mean, al? Al Tishcha, lo Tishcha L'Chometz, al Chometz. Al, what does that mean? But Shimon holds al might be nearby. Don't shecht when clearly, don't shecht the Pesach when the Chometz is nearby, in the Azara. Rav Yochanan could say al, doesn't mean nearby. And you shecht even if it's in Yerushalayim. So now, based on this explanation, what would be the din according to Rish Lakish if it's next to you in a window? So according to another explanation, they're arguing al. Does al mean nearby or not? Then man da'ama ba'azara, the one who holds, Rish Lakish who holds, the chometz has to be in the azara, exeres hakosov. So the chometz has to be in Yerushalayim, and even if it's next to you in the window, you're not chayiv. Because at the end of the day, Yerushalayim, it's got to be right next to you. Al, he learns al means it's got to be right next to you. Okay? My time, there's two dots here, but it's all one sugya here. But anyway, two more lines. My time of Rabbi Yehuda. Actually, this is a new piece, isn't it? This is the source for Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. If you shech the tamid, yeah, that's a new piece. I think we can leave that for another day. Yeah. I don't know why there's two dots.